welcome to our March edition of Tech Talks. This event is usually a members-only event and is designed to be interactive. So, it gives you a chance to get up close and personal with our speakers and our panelists. So, feel free to, if you think of questions along the way, to pop your hand up and ask questions. I think Kylah's happy to take those. But before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. Now, in honor of International Women's Day, which actually was last week, I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to bring together three amazing women in the resources sector doing some great things. They'll be engaging in discussion. We've got Kylah Morrison from Mettle Ignited, so she'll be facilitating the panel. Erin Mettle from Camp Connect and Peta Chirgwin from Chameleon Mettle Group. So I will hand it over to Kylah now, who will kickstart the discussion. There you go.
Thanks, Renu, and great to see everyone here despite the rising numbers here in Perth. And hello to everyone who's watching it back later on through the core membership group, so a little plug there. It's great to have these fantastic female founders with us today. I'm going to start off without trying to cover their bios and do it justice and get them to do it themselves. So perhaps Erin, do you want to go first and tell us a little bit about Camp Connect and perhaps how you got into it?
Sure, so Camp Connect, that's right. So Camp Connect is a mining and construction workforce communication engagement emergency management platform. So basically a mobile app with an on-site platform. So my background's in mining for the last 9 years in HR, health and safety and emergency, working across large and small companies, and was essentially trying to create something that having one source of truth to fix a variety of problems, because we found there's so many different apps coming out that do one thing and operate in completely different ways, and it's just not something that's suited for that environment and technical capability, but also having something that's built for the mining environment that actually works in that environment and works offline, unlike a lot of other things that seem to go in there. So our aim was, given that you've got around 90% of the workforce that don't have access to computers, which is where a majority of communication comes through, our approach for this was basically trying to provide that on-hand access to everyone and to make mining more easily and adaptable for people coming on board, to try to deal with the mental health issue by actually socially engaging people and building their confidence and capability, and having a means of emergency as well around with a lot of the issues around crisis that happen. When we look at the fact that the biggest thing that kills people in mining is not a work-related medical fatality, and if some of those things could have got help quicker, it probably could have been a different situation. So that's basically what we do and how that came about.
Thanks, Erin. I know when I first heard about your app, I thought, I've done that. I've done with that a few times, getting on my site and thinking, where's my room? No one's told me where anything is. It's great. First, I'd like to start with a shameless plug for the Cancer Council. I put on your chairs there a donation request. I'm doing a thing called a shitbox rally. I'm driving a car worth less than $1,000, about 3,000 kilometres from Wollongong to Mackay and all over the place in between. So if you don't mind, and sorry for messing up your seats there, but anyway. So Peta Chirgwin, my company's name is Chameleon Mettle Group. I've worked in mining for about 20 years, mostly in a mix of operations and technology projects. I started my company firstly as a sole trader because of the reason that I could see some really poor organisational transformation happening in technology projects. I spent a lot of time working in automation and other types of technologies, and I realised that the people that get left behind will spend lots of money on the shiny things and not so much money on the people. So my interest sort of came from there. I did the Core Start program last year, so from the Core Start program I decided to go from sole trader to a company. I've got a contract with BHP currently where that takes up most of my time. I'm working 4 days a week on their rail technology project for transformation support for technology on that project. Additionally, through the Core Start program, I started another business called P-Tech, and the P-Tech business is looking at organisational transformation in a metaverse platform. So providing access to the organisation, whether it be in Australia, Chile, Queensland, wherever it is, for people either on site or in offices. Again, similar to Erin, so that it can combat some mental health issues, transition issues, training opportunities, growth issues, growth opportunities for employees. They can have access to mentoring and networking that they may not have, particularly for those in rural settings. Another thing that the feedback that I got from my surveys that I sent out was that there was people that were struggling on site with understanding what was going on in the organisation and a real fear of what was next with the future of work. What does this automation thing mean for them and their jobs? And from an organisational perspective, where are we going to find the people that are skilled to do this? And where are these courses? I'm aiming to bring that all together in a duplicated metaverse of the organisation, not just for mining companies. Hopefully, I can go across other industries eventually, but beginning with mining.
Fantastic overview and really exciting project. So I'm the General Manager for Mettle United for Western Australia and South Australia. I've only been in the role for 9 months, but coming across some really incredible startups, technology companies that we have here based in WA and nationally across Australia, doing really exciting things. And for me personally, I started as an engineer, and I remember doing a race from Christchurch to Dunedin every year in a $500 car. So I don't know if it would have got 3,000 kilometres, but it does take me back to those days. And I think women working in the resources sector, anyone working in the resources sector really, because most often you will be out on site and remote, you're very resourceful. And so I think a lot of the women who've grown up professionally in the sector also are really resourceful. But also think about particularly different challenges. So I'd really love if each of you could think about, narrowing down on what is the challenge. I know you've given an overview of your businesses, but what were the challenges that you thought your product really spoke to? And then as a female founder, what challenges have you faced along the way in your startup?
So I think that's probably been for us a benefit in the way what we've created. It's looking at things from a female perspective. So when you look at the fact I think it has increased. It used to be 12, but now it's 14% of Met's businesses are either female owned or led. So not even both. So you look at what a small part of that is. But I guess that's the thing as well. A question I used to get asked a lot is, why hasn't this already been created? And I'm like, well, things get created for other industries and then they try to retrofit them in, or they're not created with things from a female perspective. So especially those coming new into the industry that might have, I didn't even know the difference between a digger and a shovel, to be honest. And I remember dig face, digger digs the face, and that's how I remember it. But just, those small things, or even being able to make friendships outside of your work group, because sometimes you are the only one. And I think people forget about how hard that can actually be, and even with navigation. Think about how many men just wander around lost because they don't want to ask for directions.
Don't know anyone like that.
A lot of people, women will just generally ask for directions. But I used to find a lot of people would ask me for directions, probably because they're embarrassed to ask other people for directions in where their room was. So I thought, surely it can't be that hard. So I think that was a big piece in that, in creating it. And also, I guess, having that HR side, I think that was what has really been a benefit in actually creating something that's catered for everyone. And when you look at sexual harassment, it's an industry-wide issue. It's not just, your Rio Tinto and BHP, it's just they're the ones that are kind of coming out and saying we're doing something. But it is a huge problem everywhere. But for the fact that saying, things aren't getting reported, I'm like, well, of course they're not getting reported if they can't report them. And that's something that we try to provide, actually having access to report an issue and find help and how to get assistance, or even understand what is or isn't acceptable. So I guess that's another big part around it as well.
And as a female founder?
Yes, I'll say challenges as a female founder. It's probably been, I would probably say being, again, it's the same thing with tech, but not having that network, I guess, with mining being very network orientated. I mean, you just have to look at diggers and dealers to generally see that it used to not be the most female friendly place. I think that's changing now. But it really exacerbates the fact that a lot of these things are like mates deals and buddy deals, and things, and I think it's the same boys club mentality, which is why it's held a lot of women back from progressing previously or even getting into the industry, where it used to be known as you got in if you knew someone that could get you in. So I feel that that's probably been one of the big, probably one of the big challenges. And the others I would probably say are more just around long vendor processes are our other big challenge, but I think that's either here or there.
But a huge.
But yeah, it's a huge issue. Like we've got one we've been in since April last year.
Yeah.
So and then in that time people leave and new ones come, and it just drags everything out. So I guess I'd say that, and also I guess the funding issue as well. So that's also a pretty obvious one, that only 3% of funding goes to female-owned or led businesses. So and even though there's new things coming in, which I think are great, I think the Female Founders Grant was a classic example of one that really demonstrated, there was a grant that came out, but I mean, we got into the second phase, but it took us, we got told in February, but we were meant to be told in September the outcome. So, and then there was only 3 from WA that actually got in. So, they're trying to do things, but I think at the same time, it still creates a challenge in that part.
Yeah. What's the specific challenge that Chameleon Mettle Group speaks to? And then as a female founder, what challenges have you faced?
Thanks. Sorry, I was getting too into
More than welcome to reply.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the shovel business. When I used to work in the control room, we did have someone who went to a drag line and asked to get loaded in her 200-ton dump truck by a drag line, which would bury the thing. So you're not alone. I know what the mining equipment was, but Chameleon Mettle, probably Chameleon Mettle and Peta, we're both organisations, if I can speak as one, because I'm the founder for both of them. The challenge that we're trying to face is a number of things, and they're all around people and organisational transformation for the future of work. You might have read a lot of things about the great resignation and the great attrition and things like this. That's one thing that we're trying to solve for. I think recently the ABS put out some stats saying that despite all the assistance that we've had with COVID, where the unemployment rates are still rising, mining companies in particular are having a hard time finding employees and skilled employees that have relevant qualifications for technology and moving into transformation into the digital world. That problem is just increasing more and more. I do some work with TAFE as well, and one of the problems that we found at TAFE was that we don't have codes, ANSCO codes at the moment for a lot of the work that is coming up, or actually that's occurring now. It's really difficult to map skills for codes for job classifications that don't currently exist. So we go to the nearest job role, which may be engineer or maybe nuclear process plant operator or something like that, and we try and map them there. So bringing it all into a metaverse and doing a deep dive with a consulting company, the aim is trying to solve some of these transformational issues that we see. Also with that, I touched on it earlier, is people are scared of what the future holds for them. They don't have access to networks. Similar to Erin, we're seeing increases in mental health issues, and with the great attrition, people are leaving because they don't feel valued in the workplace. There's some work overload happening. The job design is incorrect because again, we don't know what we're designing jobs for if we don't know what the classification of the job is. So some of the data that can come from the metaverse platform will indicate to organisations where is the interest from employees, where can we focus our attention, what types of skills are they looking for, what kind of conversations are they having, where are they looking around. So a multitude of data that can come from the platform to support the organisation in planning for the future, but also to support and enable the employees. The aim is really to help employees by just giving them something better than a barbecue or a fruit bowl. There you go, she'll be right, pat on the back. We've done our thing, or for when we're talking about some of these FIFO sexual harassment issues, training everyone in the organisation on how they should behave isn't necessarily going to solve that issue. It's a step in the right direction, but we've got such a long way to go. Through the metaverse platform, I'm hoping that I can see some psychological data as well that come from people. What are their behaviour types? What kind of employees do we have, what types of behaviours are they having, and tailoring programs that can help us be a bit more proactive rather than reactive with all sorts of things, you know, training, organisational plans, work design, mental health and wellbeing, you know, to name a few things, but all around that human-centric design.
Yeah, really important points.
I didn't say my challenges.
Your challenges as well, but we'll come back to them. But I do wanted to summarise those two key points there that I picked out of that with the future skills. I'm on the Electric Line Consortium has a number of work streams, and they're looking at electrification of lines, and so obviously there's the equipment side of things, and how do we get ready for decarbonisation, or actually, you know, implement processes to decarbonise lines. And one key piece is the future skills, and as Peta said, there's a number of job skills that we don't even know that we might need in 15 years' time, let alone jobs that people are doing now that don't have classifications, and therefore you can't train people because we don't have the qualifications. So we were talking offline before about the work that you're doing with TAFE, which is fantastic on automation of mining, Cert 2 and 4. Yeah, and really critical pieces to the puzzle that I really underestimated before I was in the role that I'm in, and in the group that we're working with, the Electric Line Consortium. And really interesting that governments are only just now starting to look at these megatrends and how they might impact future workforce training. So that's a really key point. And the other one, I think that you mentioned, Erin, about the long sales cycle in the resources sector. Yes, it's not female specific, but to your point about networks, I think if you do know people, you know, the squeaky wheel always gets the oil. If you know the right people to contact in organisations, sometimes that can be sped up a bit. And I think that long sales cycles, delayed access to capital potentially, they're all impacts that can impact, they are all challenges that can impact female founders. So, Peta, have you got any other challenges that you've come across being a female, or perhaps challenges that you've flipped on the head to leverage?
Not necessarily being a female founder, but I was going to say funding. Funding's a big thing for me, particularly from a prototype perspective. You know, that's where I am now, ideation to prototype to going on. Yeah, so support with funding is a big problem. On the vendor supply, I'm lucky. I've got quite a few contacts in mining. I've been in mining for a long time. But without those contacts, I would have had a lot of trouble getting, you know, some of the work that I've had, because there's been a few times that I've just shaken my head. But I would hate to be coming from the outside into this organisation trying to access it. They've asked me to come on board, and they want me to come on board, but that's it. They don't even know how their organisation works with vendors and suppliers. You know, so how are you supposed to know? So I've been really fortunate that I've had contacts, but I would hate to you know, not have those contacts. It's really important to be able to make the contacts, but maybe to make ourselves more accessible, you know, in the mining industry.
Great points. And to the point about the access to capital, 2 points on that. So as I am learning and getting up to speed with all of this side of things with resources technology, the thing that I didn't really sort of grasp back from university to now in real life was, you know, that those 2 values of death. So we've got that first value of death, you know, proving out that the technical product or the app or whatever it is, whether the technology is actually feasible. And then we've got that further sort of value of death when we've got that commercial maturity and whether we can scale fast enough to bring people on board, to grow our company and to be able to scale, to be able to meet the demands of the client. So there's those 2 aspects that we really need to be mindful of. And talking about funding, interestingly, in the recent article by Business Insider, they talked about the total equity invested in Australian startups surpassed $10 billion in 2022, which was 3 times the year before, the amount the year before. And 6 in 10 male founders were highly confident about securing their next raise, compared to 1 in 10 women, female founders, I should say, being confident about securing their next raise. And there's obviously a number of aspects to confidence. I run a women in leadership program and had a podcast and talked to many women in the resources sector and outside. And they say that the old adage that, you know, women will apply for a job when they might have, you know, 90 or 100% of the job criteria. stereotypically men might apply if they have, you know, half the criteria and give it a go. I've definitely seen both males and females not fit the stereotype, but we do see predominantly that confidence comes from taking a go, and typically men are doing that more so than women. So a number of things, training's going to help, but it's not going to get us there. Back at uni, I did a project with the president of the International Institute for Petroleum Engineers, who was the president. She was interviewing women in engineering back in 1998, mind mapping what we could do to get more women into engineering. And the things that she put on that mind map are things that are being talked about today, and it's not moving that needle. So there are definitely some step changes, and I wonder if the metaverse, new to this, and I think the point you picked up on those psychological things that maybe we don't logically understand and are able to fix. So speaking about International Women's Day then, what does that mean to you, Erin? And what advice do you have for women working in the resources sector or looking to join the industry?
I think it's a really great initiative because I think at the end of the day, I think it's one of the, who is it, She Codes or Women in Technologies quote, where it's if you can't see her, you can't be her, you can see her, you can be her. And I feel that really plays a really vital role in actually creating that, I guess, that level of motivation of people to do things. And you see a lot of the time, I've seen on a Facebook group, men complain a lot about roles being advertised specifically for women. And a big part of that is around just giving women the confidence. When you were saying before about only meeting 100% of the criteria, I think we went for such a long range of time where advice to women was, if you want to get into mining, you have to go into catering, and then you network, and then you meet some people, and then you get in. Whereas men wouldn't be given that advice. They would just be going, oh yeah, I've got a mate that works in trucks, so I've got a job as a truck driver now, so I'm a man, I can just drive one. So I think it's really important promoting what people can. It's quite funny. I put my 2 cents in when I think it's valid. Oh, you know, people need empowering sometimes. And, you know, yeah, you still see people well-intentioned giving that same advice because that's how they did it. You know, it's not that way anymore. It's 2022. So, and I also know someone that's been held back before and not getting a role who did know people because the mine manager was concerned of who was going to cook his breakfast because she was his favourite breakfast cook. So blocked her from getting a job despite the fact being an amazing worker. So, yeah, I think it really demonstrates what can be capable so people have something to aim for, because if you have nothing to aim for, you know, you see people as well that are sometimes like now, they're the first ones in their whole family generation that have gone to uni. And it's because they've seen someone else that's been an external role model, and it's helped give them that confidence to go, okay, well, you know, I can achieve this and I can do this. And I feel that that's a really important part of what this celebrates. And as much as you hear the comments of, wow, they're an International Men's Day, it's Men's Day every day. No, it's not. But it, I think it's really important to be able to actually shine light on that and also force that corporate responsibility a bit as well. So when we look at the influencer model of change, peer pressure, personal motivation, and what everyone else is doing is a big part of that. So if companies see people progressing, it's very easy for them to say, okay, well, why aren't we doing this? Because we're behind the line if we're not coming to this standard. So I feel the more it gets promoted, the more it does start creating more of a social onus to be doing more and try to remove exactly that with break the bias of what people can become, but also breaking the bias around what does this role actually look like. And in mining as well, I think it's also, if we want to start seeing more people progress, it's about having people in that top level that are able to promote and mentor those people into those positions, because typically with an unconscious bias hiring strategy, people will hire in what reflects them as a person. So men are more inclined to hire men because that's more reflective of who they are. So I feel it is a really important part, and to celebrate the people that are actually having to overcome adversity and overcome barriers and challenges to get into these roles, especially when we look at more women now taking trades roles and things like that, whereas that previously wouldn't be something that people considered. So I think that's a really essential part. What was the other part of that?
What does International Women's Day mean to you, and tips for women entering resources industry or tech?
Yes, so I would say entering the resources industry, definitely right now, just applying, but also another comment I see a lot is, it's another one I put my 2 cents into, where someone said, I have no experience, but I want to get into mining. And then you start seeing the people commenting about going to catering, and I'm like, no, just do what you want. And I actually do reference the Minerals Council careers guide quite a lot. I do love to post that one in there because it maps out a very clear pathway of all the different roles you could do and getting them to actually think about what skills they already have, because a lot of people can't use computers in mining. There's a lot of people that have been there for a very long time and just computers aren't their world. So it's really harnessing on what those future skill sets are going to look like and how they're able to add value to the company in those skill sets, but also thinking about what are the things that they actually do want to do. And also thinking about from their own career path, you know, what extra training or things can they do on the side that aren't just trying to drive a dump truck. Like it's about, you know, what's your reason behind getting into mining? Is it because you want that lifestyle, or is it because you honestly really want to drive a dump truck? So I think that's another big part as well. There's this great opportunity, but it's about being strategic in how they take that opportunity and where they go with it.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said there. For me though, it's a little bit bittersweet. I would like to think that we don't need international women's day. It'd be really nice if you know, we can just celebrate being us, you know, and all the great people that there are in the world. And I'm saying that from a place of, you know, working in a mine where I was the only woman, where I was told every day that you're not welcome here, and you know, all sorts of disgusting things occurring. You know, that really made me think about my choices in mining. I also started as a cleaner. Put my CV on someone's desk, on HR's desk every day, and just annoyed the hell out of everyone while I was cleaning the offices. Until 9 months later, they eventually offered me a job driving a truck. Yeah, so I do come from a place of knowing what it's like, but it would be so nice to be able to just you know, celebrate people for their accomplishments, not for their sex. And you know, I'd like to be known, you know, as a leader, not just a female leader or a female CEO. I'm a CEO, successful CEO, or you know, that's what I'd like to be able to celebrate. We're not there yet, we've got a long way to go. So yeah, really valid points. And until we get there, you know, we need things like International Women's Day and some KPIs. I know that an organisation that I was in a leadership position for, 50-50 team. Every woman on my team had a degree, most of them masters. Not one male. One male had a bachelor's degree. All of the men got paid more than their female counterparts. As a matter of fact, someone that was working for me without a degree, as I was working towards my doctorate, was getting paid more money than his boss, not myself. So you know, that's a little hard to swallow, but it's the reality. Yeah. So I mean, there's things we can do though. Talking about bias. I saw recently in a kitchen a note saying, clean up after yourself, your mother doesn't work here.
Oh.
I've seen that lots of times, and I've also heard people say, I'm not your mother, do it yourself. So even without realising the intention there, we're creating a bias and a culture of bias. I spoke to someone recently, they worked for a local council pool, and they were telling me part of the job was to maintain the gardens as well. And they were telling me that none of the boys there knew how to mow the lawn. They had to teach the boys what were their fathers teaching these boys. And I said, what about the girls? Don't you have any girls working at that pool? Yeah, but their job is to clean the bathrooms. Oh, okay, so we've got a job for the girls cleaning the bathrooms and a job. So there's bias there without even considering it. And why can't the mother teach the children how to mow the lawn? I didn't know that women weren't supposed to mow lawns. Otherwise, you know, that would save me a lot if I did it, you know. I didn't have to do that. So there's this unconscious bias that we put into, you know, our everyday lives that we teach our children without even realising. So by the time we get to an organisation or to, you know, to the workforce, we already have these bias in place. So breaking those bias early is for me key to really moving in the right direction for you know, equal partnerships. I must admit I'm not a fan of the KPIs, 50-50 KPIs. I've had some fantastic jobs that I've been able to offer people, and some really well-qualified men that haven't been able to get the job because they're not a female, and they only want a female, don't care if they're skilled or not. that's disappointing. It's great that females can have that job, you know, that opportunity, but I find it can be quite hard, and perhaps it's giving a negative effect the other way. You know, I may be wrong, and might be getting away with a few people here, but you know, I think there's opportunities for everyone. You know, I've also, you know, worked quite hard to get where I am. I do notice that there is some, you know, increasingly really qualified women that potentially, you know, they have to work even harder, you know, when they can look around than their male counterparts. There is this buddy system. I've also known a lot of women groups, you know, be it women in mining, women in technology, and they've got people that work on those, or you know, that are part of those groups. That when you get back to the workplace, they don't want to talk to you. They're in a senior leadership position. They work really hard to get to that position, and they want to hang on to it. So I think again, boosting other females and really, you know, helping people through, not just females and males, but you know, hold true to your value. Don't just do it because you're putting it on your CV. Do it because you mean it. You know, you're really caring about the other people. If it means you're missing out on an opportunity because you're boosting someone else, then so be it. You know, your time will come. And my advice probably is stay true to your values. Work hard. Think about what you really want. When I say stay true to your values, yeah, do you want to work in mining, and why do you want to work in mining? And then you probably could get the job that you want. Network as hard as you can and try and get a mentor. That's kind of 2 cents.
Yeah, great suggestions. Really interesting conversation around breaking the bias, and then a bit on KPIs and quotas as well. An interesting little snippet that I came across, I had this short stint in London following my husband and his work. Truly leveraged that by doing my company director's course in Dubai. Thanks, husband, for half the trip over there. And I found out in my research, just doing some of the work that I was doing over there, that LinkedIn's recruitment processes, so not they're posting other people's jobs, but in recruiting for their company, they were running some really sophisticated machine learning and AI algorithms and gamification to get people through, like much further through the recruitment process before they even touched a human. And I think it's really important with that unconscious bias is that we need it. We have millions and millions of pieces of data coming into our brains every second, and we're having to make decisions based on that. So over time, we've evolved and got really smart about sifting what's important, what's not important. And so bias is really important and critical in decision making. It's really when we are not aware of the bias that we are putting in our decision making, that's when we need to start being a bit more mindful about our decision making. And so I did want to call that out today, and I thought about it as I was driving here, and it was way too late to be bringing this up. But you know, if we're talking about unconscious bias, you know, yes, it's International Women's Day was last week, but there's plenty of other minority groups that we could be talking about. There's different female founders of different colours, of different sexual orientations. You know, it's not even 50-50 these days, and so all of the things that we're used to talking about, you know, male and female, there's so many more variances and different minority groups that we do need to be considering with that. And so I'm going to take that on myself today for any panels that I'm moderating and anything to try and make sure that we are getting as a diverse perspective as we can. But I think the stories that you've shared have been so valuable. So I'd love to get just a couple of questions from the audience, if you do have some questions for these incredible women. Yeah.
We're talking about challenges, which I think you guys articulated really well, and that was really enjoyable. But what are some of the greatest things, I suppose, that you've been able to achieve? Are there anything because of being female, or anything that has been great for either of you?
Awesome. So the question is, what do you think your greatest achievements have been? And was there any reasons, you know, being a female, that you think that you've achieved these things? And I'm going to have my say on that in a second. So greatest achievements, and being a female, has it been positive in some aspect?
I would say the sexual harassment inquiry recently has definitely given us a lot more platform, a lot more emphasis, so that I would definitely say has been it is, that it's happening in the industry. I think that's been one that's been a definite positive for us, because it's getting a lot more look in, a lot more severity, and it's one of our key things that we try to solve. I guess it's one of those things, you can say it's a problem, but until it actually gets the light shone on it, I think that's definitely a big one. And I would probably say as well, a number of initiatives that are coming out at the moment, they've definitely had that benefit with that as well. So like Core Innovation, they had a female founders sprint program that they ran. So I think that was really good. I think it's giving a lot of light in really trying to make a difference and actually trying to change things. I mean, you can see that with the stats looking with Mets, from 12% to 14% female owned or led, that's a 2% jump in 1 year compared to what it's been before. And I think, that's definitely from support and things that are coming this way and trying to do more to actually boost being a female in this industry.
For me personally, I think probably my greatest achievement, or one of my greatest achievements, is just my career progress in mining, particularly. Having started firstly as a cleaner and then an operator, and making my way through to all of the different jobs that I've had along the way. Especially in those first years, being told that I wasn't wanted, and all sorts of nasty things that I was told. To be able to stick in there and be resilient and grow as a leader and grow as a person. There were some really dark times where I thought, I just can't leave this. And then I thought, if I go, they'll win. And much to Erin, point before with the saying that, women in mining or whoever it was came, if you can see it, you can be it. And all of us have contributed to that. The fact that we've suffered in there, we've had some hard times and some, good times, not to say we haven't had good times, but there's been some really hard times. To demonstrate that resilience to other people coming into the industry. But it's a noticeable change from even 10 years ago. You can really see the change. It's a different place walking into a mine site these days than what it was even a decade ago. So I think we've all contributed to that, and that's a really great achievement, not just for me, but for all women involved. Secondly, writing the course for TAFE. It was much needed. The certificate 2, certificate 4. Obviously, I didn't do it all myself. That was a working group. I'd like to say I was a large contributor, but seeing that through and getting that done, and seeing the people come through, and having the students from schools as well coming in, really great to see them have a pathway, or at least the start of a pathway. We're still working on what that pathway is, but we're getting there. So hopefully we can continue to develop that and be able to get more people interested in the med sector.
Can I add my achievement? I forgot to add my achievement. Sorry, yes. I'd probably say getting sales is probably my biggest achievement, because God, it's hard. So no, that was a very exciting moment for us. And I'll probably say as well, from a motivational piece. So I had a baby in between starting this, or basically started this while I was working full time at the same time, and then just busting my butt at night and on my time off, and then basically having a baby in between that, still going, still flying to site, awkwardly pumping when I was on site because had to, which is quite funny. But I guess as well, even just being able to prove that it is changing. I think that's one of the things that holds women back sometimes with investment, is the fact that people think, oh, well, are they going to have a kid? Are they still going to be as motivated? And a lot of that's based on their own bias and their own perception of, maybe what their partner was like when they had a child, or in the workplace, or things like that. But I think being able to prove, well, no, I actually just kept going throughout this. I actually did a client follow-up call while I was in hospital at one point. So I think I know it's quite funny, I put on a pretty good peachy voice, trying to hide being tired. But I think that's one of the things as well, it's probably been a big achievement in actually proving that it is possible to do this if you really want it. And it's that thing, people say, oh, but you've got a baby, and it's like, well, you don't forget about your other child because a new child comes along. So I guess you just make it work, and I think if you care enough about something, you will make it work.
Huge achievement. I'm glad that you threw that one in. One last question from anyone?
One last one. From a startup perspective, is there all the stuff that you learned as you've gone along Is there any advice or anything you can give other startups, that particularly, so to say you could do it again, is there anything new you would do from what you've learned?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you were to do it again as a startup, what would you give yourself advice, or if you're giving other startups advice, what would you advise?
Oh, there's so much. I would say doing a lot more research first in proper process and not just trusting the people, you know, say you're paying a lawyer to set all your stuff up, not just trusting their word for it, like actually looking into what it actually is, what you actually need, and seeking other advice on that one as well to make sure that you've got all your dots and I's crossed. I'd probably say, yeah, that's probably made a big difference. I'd probably another one too, if you're using vendors, get them to ask them for a reference, so someone they're currently working with that you can talk to in how their experience has been, so not relying on Google reviews, because sometimes you can find out that a lot of the Google reviews are people from their own company and they're a very career and company destroying person that you've just engaged. And yes, that's probably my two biggest learnings, I'd probably say, in trying to get those things, I guess, right, because I think if we had some of those things right in the beginning, we wouldn't have had a lot of the drama that we have.
I'm still at the startup phase, so I'm just taking mental notes of everyone's comments. But I mean, for me, it's really been about networking and trying to get to know as many people as I can and take on as much advice as I possibly can. And of course, start program for anyone who wants to speak to the startup.
Awesome, thank you. So my job now is to summarise the panel. Fantastic conversation today, and I really have loved this environment to be able to share your stories. So the challenges that you both addressed potentially as female founders in the resources sector were having those networks and building those networks early to get your foot in the door. Long sales processes in the mining and resources sector, which I think is agnostic across any startup. Getting access to capital can be difficult. Jobs being coded correctly and making sure that we have the right skills, planning for the future. Making sure that not just the technical training is addressed, but the human factors side of things. So the psychological training and behaviours that we need in the workplace is really important as well. The other things we talked about was the positive change that we're starting to see in the resources sector and more broadly with that social licence to operate. We're seeing purchasers, we're seeing shareholders and stakeholders starting to vote with their feet. And fortunately, we are seeing that lead to the mega trends of, clean energy, electrification of mines, and fortunately, more of a focus on how do we attract the right human talent. And I think the work that you're doing, Peta, with the metaverse and Chameleon, Mettle, and consulting for the human aspect of technology transformation, and then of course the Camp Connect app to make sure that workplaces are more safe, welcoming, and effective work sites, I think is really, really important. And then advice just at the end there for the startups was to do research and fact check any of the experts or the advice that you seek with multiple sources, and also get references for the vendors. So I thought you were going to say get references for your clients, which could be another suggestion. Do you interview your client as well? Do you really want to be working with the client? Particularly if the sales cycles are really long when you're just starting out. So fantastic conversation, ladies. I really appreciate your time, and I think your startups are absolute fantastic testament to Core and the program that they run. So Core Start was what Peta did, and Erin was Hot 30 winner last year, and she was also in the Prostate Accelerator.
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. So great programs. Do get in touch with Core if you're interested in more information in becoming a member or help as a startup.